there, welcome to Kadenang Kapoy-od, Voices of Hope from Mindanao's Youth. This is a podcast where we open our hearts to the stories of children trapped into labor. As young people and followers of Christ, we are called to protect every child's dignity, a mission that the church passionately supports. Because every life is precious to God. With UNSDG Goal 8 calling for decent work and economic growth, it's about time we stand up and take action. Should we begin?
Welcome to today's podcast, where we confront the moral and ethical challenges of child labor, a pressing issue affecting millions, especially here in the Philippines. It's more than just an economic problem. It's a violation of human rights and a threat to children's freedom. Joining me today is my co-host Penelope.
Thanks, Simran. I couldn't agree more. Today, we'll explore the ethics of child labor, how it violates natural laws and children's freedom, and how our faith also calls us to act. We'll also dive deep into philosophical views on human freedom. Today, we have special guest speakers. We have Adrian on moral perspectives,
Hello, everyone.
Leo on natural law,
Hi, guys.
and finally, Rain on Christian teachings and the Catechism of the Catholic Church.
Hello, everyone.
We're in for a meaningful discussion, so let's get started. Let's begin by understanding the different moral perspectives on child labor. Adrian and Leo, from what you have both seen, why do you think child labor remains so widespread, particularly here in Mindanao? Adrian, would you like to share?
Thank you, Simran. Poverty is a significant reason. Many families feel that they have no choice, making child labor a means of survival. At that time, some businesses exploit cheap labor without considering its long-term impact on children's.
Indeed, Adrian, this certainly sounds concerning. Do you think parents know they're consciously putting their children to danger, or do you think they have a different thought process for this?
Good question. I wouldn't say that they want to put their children at risk. It's more like a desperate decision. When poverty is extreme, they can't even feed themselves. So sending children to school is a luxury they can't even afford.
But isn't it morally problematic? Children should be in school, not working.
Well, to add to that, Sim, it absolutely is morally problematic. But we have to understand where these families are coming from.
Right. Shouldn't the government step in and help so that families don't have to turn to child labor?
In theory, yes. We have many laws for that, like the Republic Act 1931, which bans extreme child labor. But even if the authorities have intentions, it's very likely that corruption and our weak law enforcement prevent aid from reaching those in need. Child labor isn't just about choices, it's a systemic failure.
So, if the government isn't doing enough, what about businesses? Shouldn't they also take responsibility and refuse to hire children?
Exactly.
That's the dilemma. Some companies exploit child labor to cut costs, also known as cheap labor, while others unknowingly allow it. Some combat this by ensuring fair wages for their adult employees. Blaming corporation is easy, but for many families, poverty leaves no choice.
I agree. Many exploit children because it's simply cheaper, even if it's unethical for kids to work beyond their limits, damaging their health and development. Businesses take advantage of struggling families and force children into labor instead of education.
Then that also has lasting consequences. Without education, these children grow up without the skills to secure stable jobs. Many of these children struggle financially. Some even turn to crime just to survive. I can recite that they're not just deprived of opportunities, they're set up to fail.
And it really hurts the economy too, because without proper skills, the workers in the future will not be able to empower themselves and although the businesses might save money now, they're actually hurting the society's future.
That's why child labor isn't just unethical. It holds entire communities back. Breaking the cycle means not just ensuring fair wages for adults and education for children, but also demanding systematic change. That's the absolute path to progress. And it's a journey that we must all embark on. To elaborate, let's discuss how child labor violates fundamental human rights and natural laws. Right, Penelope?
For sure, Simran. Leo, can you tell us about the natural laws that child labor violates? For context, natural laws in Christian morality refer to all the God given laws humans need to live in this world.
Sure, Pa. So, first, child labor goes against doing good and preserving life. It exploits children and denies them basic fundamental rights, like education. You have to note that the adults must be the one the child needs to rely on, not vice versa. It also weighs on people's consciences. Deep down, they know it's wrong, but they let it happen anyway. And this goes beyond education. Child labor is also violating the right to a safe and healthy childhood. Many of these children, they work in hazardous conditions in factories, plantations, and construction sites, facing harmful chemicals, extreme heat, and exhaustion. This puts them at serious risk of physical and mental health issues.
And I also want to say that it's not just about the physical work also, because we've also heard about stories of children wherein they can't eat properly, so that's why they have malnutrition. Yeah, because sometimes they don't have enough money to earn, or like they don't earn enough money for proper meals.
That's kind of sad.
Yeah.
And it's not just physical harm. Many children working under these conditions experience mental trauma such as psychological stress, fear, and all sorts of abuse. They are treated as cheap, discardable labor rather than human beings who deserve care and protection.
Based on what you all have said, beyond education and safety, what other right is taken away from them?
So I would say the right to freedom. Many of these children don't get to choose what's best for them. They are forced into labor by their circumstances, families or employers who take advantage of their vulnerability. They have no real say in their future because survival for themselves or their loved ones comes first.
A very harsh and tragic truth. And the worst part is that even though these rights are recognized internationally, violations still happen every day, especially in our country, which is the Philippines.
That brings me to an important question. Do you guys think that enough is being done to uphold these supposed human rights?
Good question.
Sadly, no. Many laws are implemented to prevent child labor, but enforcement and implementation is weak. Families often stay silent due to financial dependence or lack of awareness, while business exploit child labor through bribery, loopholes, or minimal oversight.
Well, enforcement isn't just on the government, it's also on our society, businesses, and our consumers. By supporting industries that rely on child labor, even unknowingly, people contribute to this problem.
So even unknowingly, these people are actually enabling child labor to happen. That's a really big problem, right? So, Leo, should people be more mindful of where they buy their products?
True.
Yes, absolutely. Ethical consumerism, it pressures companies to change. When consumers demand fair labor practices and avoid businesses that exploit children like these, companies are forced to act. But a real change requires widespread awareness and commitment.
That brings us to our next topic. How does this issue connect with the moral and religious values? As Christians, we believe that every child is created in the image of God. How does child labor go against this belief?
Well, the main idea in Christian morality is that every person, including me, including you, they have dignity because we are made in God's image. Child labor strips that dignity away, treating children as mere workers rather than individuals meant to be learned to love and to flourish. This goes against God's plan. Children shouldn't bear adult burdens before their time.
But honestly, if we're going to talk about this realistically, how do we honestly change this? How can we ensure that human rights, including children's rights, are fully respected and protected in Mindanao?
If the society truly believes that every child reflects the image of God, obviously we should be doing more to defend their dignity.
Yes, absolutely. As Christians, we are called up to stand for justice. In Matthew 25:40, Jesus says something along the lines of, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Defending children from exploitation is part of that. If we truly value human dignity, we must push for stronger protections, support ethical businesses, and demand a better enforcement of child labor laws.
I like that you mentioned Matthew 25:40, right? I feel that in this current status quo that we have right now, those words carry a lot of weight to remind ourselves to be a moral person, right? And part of protecting children's dignity is ensuring that they have the freedom as well as the opportunity to live whole lives, which now leads us to our subsequent discussion.
Hmm. Penelope, earlier we touched on how child labor violates freedom, right? But with all the efforts to stop it, do you think we'll ever see a future where no child has to work in, let's say, the next 10 years?
Oh, I actually have an answer for this. My answer is maybe. Because although we have seen so many initiatives that aim to combat child labor, completely eradicating child labor in the next 10 years honestly seems impossible because
I-
we have deep rooted issues like poverty, no education, and economic struggles that remain significant obstacles. Until these are effectively addressed, child labor will always be there.
It's
True.
almost like their situation is already determined for them. They have no other choice.
This is where the three philosophies about freedom come in, such as determinism by M.F. Skinner, actually going to present an idea to you that many families are caught in a cycle where economic conditions, lack of opportunities, and societal norms limit their choices. Now, imagine if a family has no stable income, they might see child labor as the only way to survive. Even if they don't want that for their children, they're in a desperate position.
So, what I'm getting is, in a way, their freedom is restricted by their situation. But what about the idea of absolute freedom? Can't people just choose to break free from these struggles? Can't children just not do child labor?
I do think so. Absolute indeterminism by John Paul Sartre suggests a complete freedom detached from past conditions or limitations. But that's not how reality works. A children born into poverty doesn't just wake up one day with endless choices. Their circumstances shape their freedom. That's why solving child labor isn't just about banning it. It's about changing the structures that make it necessary in the first place. The children themselves, they have their own sense of accountability and responsibility due to their actions. With that in mind, they have the ability to resist the temptation of making the wrong choices and can avoid the circle of poverty altogether to forge their own future and their own paths.
Okay, I see your point. So, what we're getting is that if we want real change, we need to create a system where child labor isn't required for survival, right?
I think so.
Yeah, precisely. And that's where structured freedom by Abraham Maslow dives into. True freedom isn't about removing all constraints, but having a system that allows people to make meaningful choices. If we give families better opportunities like livelihood programs, accessible education, and financial support, they won't have to rely on their children's income. That way, children can learn, grow, and choose their future instead of being forced into labor, allowing them to be able to achieve Maslow's hierarchy of needs step by step.
So, as I see it, absolute freedom isn't just about having choices, it's about having real opportunities. So, if a child
Yes.
is working just to survive, do you think that's freedom?
I like that we're getting really technical with the philosophy right now, no?
Yeah.
But to answer your question,
I really like
Sim, yeah, to answer your question, Sim, not at all. It's a forced choice shaped by circumstances beyond their control. That's why we need to go beyond simply removing children from the workforce. There's so many layers to this. We need to build a society where they never have to work in the very first place. You know, giving them their basic
True.
needs like food, water, and also their right to education, like making them feel loved and belonging to a society that cares to them. This enables them to build their self-esteem, which is, I believe, the highest self-actualization, the highest point in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. One way to guide this change is through moral and ethical teachings, like those found in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which we will now be discussing.
So, as we discuss child labor, I think it's important to recognize the teachings of the church. So, Rain, how does catechism guide us in the fight against child labor?
I'm glad you asked him. The Catechism of the Catholic Church has clear teachings about the dignity of a human being. It states that the work of a person should uphold the individual's dignity, not degrade them. Child labor, by its very nature, dehumanizes children, stripping them away of their innocence, their right to education, and their right to a safe and nurturing environment. These directly contradicts to the Catholic's teachings.
So, is that where the church's role in advocacy becomes necessary?
Exactly, Sim. The church doesn't just give spiritual advice, it pushes for laws, better policies, and genuine support for families.
That's interesting.
That's interesting.
Noted. This is noted, Rain. So our faith is not just about praying. Our faith can lead to action if we embody our principles. Yeah.
Right. Praying is essential, but the church also calls us to act accordingly, to protect children and fight for them, for a society that values them. Our faith reminds us to protect them and honors God's plan for every life.
Such a beautiful message to end with. Thank you so much, Rain, for reminding us how faith can inspire real change. Now let's hear some final thoughts. Adrian, Leo, and Rain, if there's one key message you want our audience to take away, what would it be?
Thank you for this opportunity, Penelope. For my message is child labor is a deeply complex issue, but at its core, it stems from our failure to recognize children as individuals with rights, dignity, and the potential for a better future.
Every child deserves a chance to learn, grow, and to dream. It's not just their right, it's our responsibility to protect them from exploitation and ensure they have that opportunity.
Mine would be faith without action is empty. If we truly believe in human dignity, then we must go beyond awareness and actively fight against child labor.
Those are truly powerful words.
Thank
You so much. Thank you all for this important discussion.
I've learned a lot about our passion for change in our current society. Thank you so much, Simran, Leo,
Thank you.
Adrian. Yes,
Thank
and Rain.
you.
Thank you for
Thank you so
tuning in.
much.
And
This was
remember,
meaningful.
I hope you learned so much in this podcast, really.
thank you for tuning in. And remember, change starts with awareness and action.